Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester chats with writer and comic book legend D.G. Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes or go to patreon.com/capesandlunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Lunatics. I am Phil, and I am here with another special guest, another returning guest, Mr. David Pepose. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, and again, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, I read it. I saw it solicited. I was excited, but once I read it, I was like, I must talk to you. Cable, Love and Chrome #1. As of right now, 2 has not hit the stand, so... And again, I love Cable. I love it. I was just thinking about this. I compare him almost to Wolverine. He has like all these different adventures we've probably never seen before, but these can take place anywhere in time.
Yeah. So
yeah, I just always find that amazing. And then just the links he has to the X-Men through like Cyclops and stuff.
Yeah, he's definitely, I always describe him as the most X-Men of X-Men characters, in that, ever since the days of Claremont, the X-Men have been sort of known for this kind of winding thicket of continuity that takes all these crazy twists and turns. And, it's less retcons and more of like twists piled upon twists. And, sometimes that can be intimidating for people who want to jump into the X-Men. And I know that that's something that, with the From the Ashes era, that's something they wanted to make it very accessible for readers who are interested in the X-Men, but hadn't felt the able to jump in. But Cable is definitely one of those characters who, like I said, is the most X-Men of X-Men characters. He started off as Rob Liefeld's mysterious gun guy in the last issues of the New Mutants before it relaunched as X-Force. And and then we found out that he was actually the long lost son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, who was sent to the future. And then we got to learn his childhood in the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. And then there's been so many amazing runs with the character. Dwayne Zorzinski's 2008 run, where he raised Hope Summers was incredible. Al Ewing's Cable Reloaded was an amazing one-shot. Dennis Camp with Children of the Vault. He's a character who's got a lot of stuff to him, a lot of different angles, a lot of different facets. And that's been, I think, for me, like the big fun challenge for writing a character like Cable is, how do you take a character who's so stylized, who's so known for that particular energy of the 90s, that particular artistic aesthetic, and how do you make him how do you maintain that, but make him accessible to somebody who might not know who this character is? And so that's been, I think, a really fun thing that we've been working to do in Cable, Love and Chrome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, just the visual, he kind of keeps his 90s aesthetic just from the big guns and stuff. And,
sure.
And I thought I'd seen somewhere, I don't know who, was it CB Sobalski or Tom Brevoort? I thought someone had said, they were going to cut back on the time travel stuff with the X-Men, post Krakoa. And I was all disappointed. I'm like, oh man, does this mean we're going to be like getting little to no Cable? And then I saw this solicited. I was like, yes!
It's funny, because yes, I think what they meant was, they wanted to ease everybody into into the Ashes relaunch without having to like deal with necessarily all the timey-wimey stuff. But, we've been in this era now for a decent amount of time. And so I think now is sort of the time that we can kind of start easing in these kinds of concepts, especially for something like Love and Chrome, which is self-contained. This is not a book where we're not going to be crossing over into any of the X books. You don't need to read any of the other X books to get into ours. Something that Tom mentioned to me when we were putting this together is he was like, oh, you remember Chris Claremont and Frank Miller's Wolverine, that original miniseries? where, that's not a book that that's a character piece. It's not something that had stakes that rippled across the rest of the X-Men line. This was a book that really kind of let people know who Wolverine was. For those who only knew him as kind of the hot-headed, feisty, scrappy guy on the X-Men lineup, this was sort of a way of kind of having a story carried on his own shoulders. And that's something that we're trying to do with Love and Chrome, is that, we want to tell this kind of action-packed story that does actually, it does lean into some of the facets of time travel, and you'll see that as the series progresses. But this is Cable's story. This is not something that needs to touch every corner of the Marvel universe. And I think it may be counterintuitive. I think everybody, expects a highly interconnected storyline. But for me, I think it really speaks to my values as a writer and as a storyteller. Is I ultimately want my book and my stories to stand on their own 2 feet. I want them to be a degree of self-contained. I want, when I'm at a convention 5 years from now, I want to be able to sell this book and say, hey, listen, if you don't know who Cable is, or you only know him from Deadpool 2, check out this book. You might get a sense of who he is, while getting a really fun, action-packed, but also emotional story to boot.
So yeah, I'm sure the boss was happy with it. But so this was your idea to be like, you know what? Don't worry about the other X-Men stuff. I want Cable, isolated away from, all the characters we know.
Well, this book was very much a collaborative effort with me and Tom Brevoort. I can't say enough good things about Tom. He's been my editor for as long as I've been at Marvel. I've worked with him on Savage Avengers, Moon Knight City of the Dead, Punisher, and now this. And Tom was the one who brought up to me, he goes, I would really love to tackle a story with Cable as sort of like a time travel romance. And as we talked about it, it made a lot more sense, where it was sort of, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can tell these big bombastic Cable stories, but how do we peel back the layers a little bit to give him some personal emotional stakes so we can really get inside his head and make him vulnerable in a way that we're not used to seeing, because we're so used to seeing him as this gruff, stoic soldier. And the way that we kind of built this out was, as Tom was discussing this with me, I countered, well, we knew this was going to be a 5-issue miniseries. And I said, Cable has had some long-running love interests. There's Domino, there's Esme Cuckoo, there's the namesake of Hope Summers from the Dwayne Straczynski run, there's Jen Scott, just to name a few. And most of those characters have had a longer runway than our 5-issue miniseries. And so the question that I asked was, how do we justify a character who still has that connection with Cable, but, we can't guarantee that anyone's going to pick this character back up after 5 issues. How are we going to justify this character being a short timer? And I was really turning it in my head for a while, and it wasn't until my wife kind of got the light bulb moment for me. We were walking. There's a park nearby our apartment. We sometimes walk that park when I need to crack a story. And she asked me, what's up with Cable? What's his deal? She's not a comics fan by any means. And so it really kind of clicked for me that the X-Men have other telepaths and telekinetics. They have other gun guys. They even have other time travelers. What's the thing that Cable has that nobody else in the X-Men roster does? And for me, it was, before the legacy virus, before Mpox, before RLDS, it was that Cable had the techno-organic virus. It was this chronic terminal condition that he's been holding back his whole life using his mutant gifts of telekinesis. But he knows that one day that's not going to cut it. He is a time traveler living on borrowed time. And that is what that immediately got me in Cable's head. That was immediately the emotional through line. And that became the basis of our co-lead for this book, Commander Avery Ryder, who Cable, he's had to fight this battle by himself all his entire life. He's had loved ones, of course. He's had supporting characters, but he's never known anyone who's shared his struggle. And so by dropping him into the city of Salvation Bay, where there's been a techno-organic virus outbreak that has kind of spurred this brutal civil war, Avery is a character who understands Cable in a different way than anyone else has. And it really justifies the whirlwind nature of their romance. It externalizes Cable's internal struggle. Meeting someone else with the techno-organic virus for the first time, somebody who has had the community that she's been able to think about, what does that future mean for her, however limited that might be, that justifies the whirlwind romance for me. That's something that heightens the emotional stakes, because Cable and Avery, both of them don't know when time's going to run out. And so they're just determined to make the most out of whatever time they have left. And so that became a really interesting story for me. That really allowed me to kind of explore interesting themes and texture that I wouldn't be able to explore in another book, particularly the ethics of what is it like when you're living with a chronic condition or a terminal condition. Do you die in a hospital bed, or do you choose to die with your boots on? Do you, how do you make the most out of what time you have left? If you don't have something that's you're holding on to, something that's worth fighting for, couldn't you say the virus has already won? And that's some really interesting questions that Avery has honestly become kind of the mouthpiece to. And so that's made this story really fun, really interesting, at times very challenging. But I'm so excited with how it's been coming together. Mike Henderson is doing terrific work. We're sort of reaching the tail end of the production on the book right now. I'm writing the last issue as we speak, and Mike is almost done drawing issue 4. And so, it's been a really fun book, and to see the response to our first issue was really heartening for me, because that was, anytime you do something that's a little off the beaten path, there's always that concern of, will people understand the vision? Will people get what we're trying to do? And seeing people say, oh, I have a chronic condition, Cable makes sense to me now. Those are some of the best reviews I've ever gotten, because I think, if you can, it makes Cable a relevant character in a way that I don't think, in a way that he has not been hasn't been mined in the past, that we can have the big bombastic 90s aesthetic, which I love and I grew up with, and I'm 90s trash, but being able to, I think, be relevant to people's real life concerns, that's something that's a real gift as a storyteller, and something that I certainly don't take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I love this first issue, and then now I'm seeing it in a whole new light, in an even better light. Where, I think a lot of people take for granted, where it's just, oh yeah, his telekinesis holds back that virus. But yeah, I mean, I guess, every day he's living with, today could be my last day, and to die, something worse. Yeah,
I think it's one of those things that for so many of us, we take tomorrow for granted. And I think the idea of a time traveler who doesn't know when his time's going to run out, I think that's interesting.
Yes.
And I think he's in this setting with this character, with Avery, he's able to kind of explore this in a way that he's never been able to in other books. I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. I read that as a kid, and it really informed my take on Cable. But even that was sort of looking at his virus from a very different angle. He was still young, and he was still in the context of these, of his parents, of Red and Slim. Seeing this sort of as an adult, saying like, oh, I've made it this far, but there's no guarantees. I think in a way there's been a little bit of a paralysis to Cable, that he's never been able to get past this thought of tomorrow could be it. And so he's never really thought about anything beyond that. And that's because he hasn't had that community of people who get it. If you have cancer, there are support groups of people who have cancer. Same thing, Parkinson's, ALS, just to, name a few. Cable doesn't have that. And so Avery does. Avery has a whole city of people who know exactly what she's going through. And so she's been able to kind of tease out these larger questions. And she's been able, I think, to come to terms with her mortality in a way that Cable has not. And so that makes for some really interesting tension between them. Because, yeah, I don't think it's spoiling too much. The virus is going to throw some complications into the mix.
Yeah.
And Cable, you will find that as a time traveler, Cable might have a difficult time letting things go.
Yeah. No, I think you've cracked the code, because I was like, okay, I think we get more of Cable as the man, and even his own solo series and stuff. But even the ongoing and stuff, he was always with Domino or Blacksmith or Irene, Hope, somebody. So yeah, I think here's so isolated from anyone we know. I think you really cracked the code here, getting into his head.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, I mean, so is there any chance of anything after any talk of anything after issue 5? Or
well, this story is meant to be standalone. So we are ending at issue 5. And that's, that was the plan from the beginning. That's been the outline. I mean, I've been working on this book in some capacity for about a year. And it's sort of been juggling this with my responsibilities on Space Ghost, and then eventually Speed Racer, and then Captain Planet. But yes, that's sort of our story as far as Cable's concerned. But, if future writers want to pick up from what we're doing, it's certainly doable. It's certainly possible. And yeah, I mean, I know that there's going to be more Cable in the pages of Weapon X-Men, which Joe Casey is writing, with artist Crisscross. I think that book's going to be stellar. But I think, again, another counterintuitive thing. People always say, oh, is there going to be more? And sometimes I think less is more. I think sometimes you want to leave readers wanting more, and then they can kind of bring that to the next project. And but a story like this, especially one that's so personal, you want to keep it self-contained. You want to, first off, just from a writing and storytelling perspective, you can only kind of keep that level of emotion going for so long.
Yeah.
Before people start to get desensitized or they start to get depressed. I don't want this book to ever veer into the territory of being morbid. And so that's something that I certainly am cognizant of. But yeah, I think by having it at this 5-issue runway, we're really able to kind of concentrate like a nice emotional punch that every issue, there's some degree of tension. But we don't, I think if we try to extend it further than that over a long-term runway, I think readers would burn out. And frankly, as a writer, I probably would burn out too. I do think in certain ways, this Cable story, it is emotionally taxing. It's so funny. I used to always hear, interviews with actors where they're like, oh, I had to go to a very dark place, and, I had to recharge my batteries, and it was so exhausting. And I never quite understood what that meant until this book. And I think that's because I've had to really do a lot of thinking about all right, thinking about mortality and thinking about if you're going to die, how are you going to do it? And thinking about also okay, you have a ticking clock. How are you going to change the way you live your life? And, I think most of us are very predisposed to not thinking about mortality on a long-term basis. So, I think doing that with a character like Cable, who I always joke, his mutant power is exposition. He's got a lot to him. There's so many different facets to him. The time travel and the techno-organic virus and the telekinesis and the telepathy and the big guns, and you want to incorporate as much of that as you can. So yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that it's a juggling act. So I definitely feel like I'm writing the last issue now, so knock on wood. But I think this is the runway that you do it in to stick that landing and maintain your reader sanities and to maintain your own as a writer. So yes. To the long answer to your short question, we're sticking with 5. But we want to make sure, and we're working really hard to make sure that our readers get a really fun payoff by the end of the book.
Nice. Is there any other X characters you'd like to do like a 5-issue series on?
I don't know. I mean, I would love to write Wolverine someday. He's kind of the bucket list guy that I haven't done anything with.
Nice.
Although, I mean, Wolverine is being tackled by so many very talented creators right now.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Condon is doing spectacular work on Ultimate Wolverine. Saladin Ahmed's doing a great job with the main Wolverine book, and Ben Percy. I love what he's doing with Wolverine over in the Deadpool Wolverine book. That's a book I'm jealous of. He obviously deserves it.
I'll get to write both of them at the same time.
When I saw that announcement, I was like, oh man, what I wouldn't do. But yeah, I think Wolverine for sure. Honestly, I mean, I would love to do like a team book. There are a few concepts that maybe if there was need for them, I'd love to tackle them. But I think this is also kind of like, it's an unpredictable time, even for me. I consider myself very much on sort of the periphery of the X office because my work isn't tying into anything. I'm about as privy as, I think I get to read the books a couple weeks in advance. But that's sort of the extent of my knowledge of the X office. And so I get to be surprised along with everybody else. Oh, nice. But I think as a result, that is this. It is definitely the kind of office at this juncture where you don't know bodies are buried. So it's very much, Tom is really is the conductor of X. And so, whenever he needs things, I'm there. I honestly wouldn't even know where to begin, especially in the X office, because there's so many cool books coming out and there's so many more that I don't even know about.
All right. And then the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, I knew we were going to talk. So this past weekend, I was going past the comic shop with my family. I was like, you know what, let me just go in, see if they have Space Ghost. They had 7 of the 9 issues that are out so far. So I picked them up, read them. And again, I don't have a huge history with Space Ghost. I've seen an episode here or there. But again, I don't have the history of the character. But just purely speaking, as a fan of superhero comics, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Honestly, that you're the target audience. I know there are plenty of people who have affection for Space Ghost in his previous incarnations, whether it was the 60s original cartoon or the 80s revival, or there's plenty of people from my generation who grew up with Coast to Coast. There are even, there's fans of Joe Kelly's and Ariel Olivetti's comic from 2005, or the Jeff Parker and Doc Shanner with Future Quest from 2017. But yeah, for me, the big appeal for a book like Space Ghost is that besides the real true diehard fans, there are a lot of people who only have kind of like a very peripheral knowledge of Space Ghost as a character. But as I was doing the research, and as I was watching all the old episodes, I thought the raw materials were just dynamite. It really is like being invited into a 5-star kitchen and saying, like, nobody's made a meal with any of these ingredients. Like, what do you want to do? Alex Toth, he's the Jack Kirby of Hanna-Barbera. He designed so many incredible villains for Space Ghost over the years, or over the episodes, I should say. So many of those designs do a lot of the heavy lifting. And so every episode I watched, I took detailed notes. I probably wrote I think it was like a 50-page document of every episode of Space Ghost from the 60s and 80s. And I was like, okay, what about Creature King stands out to me? What about Zorak stands out to me? And then I kind of was able to add in little twists and turns that help play up those qualities to me. So yeah, the book has been such a gift, and the fact that Dynamite has been so generous with the runway on Space Ghost, I think, has also offered us a lot of opportunities that I haven't been able to explore before. before Space Ghost, the longest series I had written was 2 arcs of Savage Avengers. It was 10 issues.
Yes.
And I loved writing that book. But I still think I was finding my way as a writer in certain ways. In particular, I think none of us had really caught up with the trend yet that readers like self-contained stories, that they like to be able to kind of jump in, and that they don't have to say, oh, did I read the last 3 issues? Do I need this to make anything make sense? You see, I think Ryan North and Steve Orlando kind of pioneered that approach with, Fantastic Four and Scarlet Witch. And so, taking that and then also being told, oh, by the way, like, we're going to give you 13 issues to start, that really offered up a lot of opportunities. Oh, wow. And you could tell on a Done in 1 and Done in 2 stories, that really kind of clicked. And I feel like for me, the code that I feel like I've cracked, and Ryan North cracked it before I did, but every time you finish a story, a reader builds investment. And so if you can finish a lot of stories in rapid succession, readers suddenly feel very invested in these characters because they get to watch them grow and struggle, but then like rise to the occasion. And if you see them do that enough times, readers become very loyal. And readers have really rallied around Space Ghost as a book and as a concept in a way that I honestly have never had in any of my books before. So yeah, I really enjoy writing those characters quite a bit. I in fact just looked at the lettering for issue 11, which has our Council of Doom storyline kicking off. And that's been particularly heartening to see all these villains that we've spent the last year building up, seeing them interact as if not a team, as a group, and watching these kinds of the personality, stuff kind of bounce off of each other. That's been really fun. So yeah, I can't wait for readers to get to check that one out.
I think you cracked the formula because, like I said, I found all 9 issues except for issue 1 and issue 3, and I didn't feel lost having not read those, but I wanted to find them. So I'm just like, yeah, this story is good because I want the complete collection, even though I'm not lost without them, but I want them.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I think for me also the thing I love about Space Ghost is it really is. I think about this a lot, that so much of what success means in this business is that you're able to take the opportunities that kind of best suit your strengths. And that's the alchemy of comics in general, particularly licensed ones, is, and you can only control it so much. Your editors will say, hey, that's a book that I think David can do. And some books, you'll be like, oh, wow, it'll be like that. You'll get it. You will lock into that groove immediately. There are other books where it takes a little longer for you to kind of figure out your voice, and sometimes it can feel counterintuitive. Space Ghost is the book that I felt like I could instantly lock into the groove. That we're able to kind of triangulate every story based on finding new concepts for the villain. And by that, we're able to kind of inject different types of genres into the storyline and different types of pop culture influences. But the through line is always Space Ghost's relationship with the twins, Jan and Jace. And so every time that I feel potentially stuck, or every time I feel like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, 9 times out of 10, the answer is one of those things. It's either what's the concept of the villain? What's the genre that they're bringing to the mix? What is it about this villain as a concept that I can then kind of extrapolate and exploit? Or it's just, what's the soap opera, with the kids? I think the cast size is perfect. That's a book with 3.5 core cast members, plus a villain. That is great. That is a perfect size. That you're able to kind of you have enough characters that you can bounce everybody off each other, but not so many that it becomes challenging to play them all off. I mean, anybody who has like a huge cast in their book, I always am like, a lot of credit to you. Because that's not, I did it in Savage Avengers. I think we had 9 cast members and a villain at one point. And we made it work, but it took a lot of doing, yeah, I think, this book, it organically fits in just about any story concept I can think of. And, the characters feel like they've got really strong personalities from the jump. So they feel very natural to me to write. And, I really think that, what's so funny about Space Ghost in particular is, every book I'm writing in advance. Like I said, I'm writing issue 5 of Cable, while you've only seen issue 1. And so the same thing goes for Space Ghost. You guys have seen I think issue 9 has come out as of this recording. I'm already done with issue 12. I'm about to work on issue 13 now. So the best really is yet to come.
Oh, nice.
So I can't wait for everybody to get to see what we've got coming, particularly our Space Spectre adventure coming out in February, followed by our Council of Doom 3-parter that's coming up very soon.
So is that like the joy of working on a book like this? I mean, pre-existing Marvel characters are great, but like their stories told every month for the last 30 to 60 years. Yeah. Space Ghost, there's a little more, you fill in the blanks with, you're like, okay, this is my Space Ghost. This is my interpretation.
There's certainly, there certainly is a degree of freedom that comes with a book like Space Ghost. I think for me, it's, I'm able to kind of bring in all the cool tropes of a storytelling of a superhero universe. But, I have the benefit of, I don't really have to negotiate anything as far as like what characters I'm going to use or when I'm going to use them. I know that's one of the big challenges of writing at a shared universe like Marvel is that you'll say, hey, there's a villain that would be a really good fit. And nope, MODOK's over at X-Men right now, and so it can sometimes be like a little bit of a game of 20 questions with your editor, where you're like, well, what about this character? Because you don't know if somebody else is using them. And so, that's a big chunk of your editor's jobs. They know where all the bodies are buried. And if they don't know where the bodies are buried, they know who to ask where the bodies are buried. Space Ghost, I don't have to, Space Ghost is very streamlined. I just say, this is what I want to do. I wrote up a 30-page pitch document, when I came up when I worked on Space Ghost. So Warner Brothers already had a very strong idea of what I was going to do. Oh. They were very, supportive about, us kind of taking a new crack at Space Ghost. But at the same time, like, I also feel like there's no way I told Tom Brevoort this when Space Ghost first came out. There's no way I would have written that book without being trained up at Marvel. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, my Punisher miniseries was it was like the prototype for what turned into Space Ghost. My Punisher book and Savage Avengers, I would say. But even a little bit of Moon Knight City of the Dead, a little bit of that. All those books I really enjoyed making. But I think with every book, and maybe, hopefully I'm not the only writer who does this, every book that comes out, you look back and you see the warts. Every book you're like, okay, now that it's done, I could have done this, 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 and this. And so you try to kind of incorporate that with each new book. Space Ghost, I feel like this was the book that I was like, okay, I did it. Like, I really feel like that this book I was able to kind of raise my game to a certain extent. I think I am able to have my cake and eat it too, in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Not having to share the toys, but I think really the big thing is it's kind of the lack of familiarity. I think that I was talking with with Ron Mars and Gail Simone about this recently. Why are nostalgia comics so popular right now? You know, you see it with Transformers, and you see it with Thundercats, and you see it. I don't know if you can call TMNT necessarily a nostalgia comic because it never left, but you know, you see that, you see, and of course, Space Ghost. And I think what it is that we have a lot of readers who are very genre savvy. You know, they know the continuity backwards and forwards. They're reading, they're marathoning things in Marvel Unlimited. They're reading the wikis and Wikipedia. And so they will often want something super insular, you know, because that's what kind of scratches the itch at this point. Like having something that's evergreen and accessible. Sometimes that's just not what they're looking for. You know, they're like, I know who Cable is, you know, I don't need an entree for the character. I personally, those are the stories I like to tell. I think with these nostalgia brands coming back, you're able to have these big two creators who are able to kind of bring their skills to the table. But it's with these universes that are kind of unfamiliar territory for readers. And so they're like, I remember Zorak from Coast to Coast, but you know, when you see him reimagined as like the Charles Manson of space, suddenly you're like, oh, okay, like I get this now. And so it feels, I think, fresh, but really unpredictable is, I think, the word. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what's gotten readers so excited is that that's why I always feel like superhero fatigue. I don't buy it. Mm-mm. I think that the diehards really want this stuff. I think that they've been so locked in on like one superhero universe or like two superhero universes. And I think they've probably, as readers, overloaded on those. And so they need like a little bit of a palate cleanser. And I think that's what books like ours are doing, is that they serve as a nice palate cleanser for people who want superhero stories. But there's really no Wikipedia for them to get spoiled by.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a real benefit. And so I feel really fortunate that I've been able to be a part of that wave.
And you said WB had notes, Warner's had notes. Do you think, could they ever look at a book like Space Ghost and be like, you know what, we could do a new animated Space Ghost series? Or
you know, I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't know the first thing about the legality about that, or mm-hmm. what the details are as far as the licensing agreement is concerned. If you're asking me personally, it would be a huge honor and a tremendous compliment if they did a new Space Ghost series.
I'd love to see this series animated. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I would love that. I think it would be such a treat and an honor and a thrill. I couldn't say, honestly, mm-hmm. You know, I don't know what Warner Brothers plans are for any of this stuff. And I don't know, I wouldn't even know the first thing about the way that they prioritize particular animated projects. So, mm-hmm. You know, from your lips to Hollywood's ears, that's all I can really say.
And then you did mention Speed Racer, and I did see the Captain Planet announcement just a few days ago, which again, that's not like building it up from the like the ground again. Like it takes place like 30 years after the original, like the animated series, right?
So Captain Planet is a full on reboot. This is a full on relaunch, as is Speed Racer, I should say. Both of these series, I'm taking the same approach that I did on Space Ghost. Okay. That this is a clean slate. You don't have to have watched anything to understand what we're doing. We are issue 1 is the ground floor. And you know, I guess Speed Racer has been super fun. We're almost wrapped with our free comic book day issue. We got the inks on that yesterday, I believe. I think we wrapped inks on that, and I'm waiting for a lettering pass, and we have a really great colorist on board. Unfortunately, they have not announced the rest of the creative team yet, so I can't disclose who they are. But I'm very excited to be working with them. I can tell you that this free comic book day issue looks every bit as spectacular as I was hoping for this book. The only hint I'll give you is that the artist that I'm working with on Speed Racer, I actually have worked with before.
Oh.
So you might have to dig pretty deep into my League of Comic Geeks profile, but I've worked with this artist before, so that's the only hint I'll give. But yeah, Speed Racer is a fun one. I pitched that book. Well, the way that book came about was that I've worked with Mad Cave Studios for a little while now. Mark London and Chris Fernandez have been so supportive of my career, from dating back from my very first book, Spencer and Locke. And we got the chance to work together on a book called The Devil That Wears My Face, a horror book that I did with artist Alex Cormack. It's one of the proudest books I've ever done. I love every bit of it. And my only regret is I feel like the book flew under the radar a little bit because my run on Punisher was coming out around the same time. But Mad Cave, and I've loved working with Mad Cave. The editor-in-chief, Mike Martz, I've known since I was in college. He was my intern boss for my very first industry job. Christina Harrington is one of the best editors I've ever worked with. So I love Mad Cave. And so my editor on Speed Racer, Chaz Pangburn, has been reaching out to me over the years with various kind of licensed projects, saying, would you have any interest in this thing or this thing? And for me, it was either the schedule didn't align or I didn't really know the property well enough to do a pass on it. Because my process, and this may be different for other people, I try to watch everything. If I'm not already familiar with it, I gotta watch all of it. Mm-hmm. And so that is a lot of time. And so I feel like you really have to kind of weigh the trade-off. Is the time investment, is the book going to be a big enough book for you, or is it going to scratch a particular creative itch? If not, maybe this isn't the time for it to take on a book like that right now. So San Diego Comic-Con last year, I was doing a signing at the Mad Cave booth for The Devil Wears My Face, and Chaz pulls me aside and says, so we have been working with Tatsunoko Productions on Gotcha Man, and the book has been a real success for us. And so we have actually acquired the publishing rights for Speed Racer. And we were thinking that you might be a good fit. And as the words left Chaz's mouth, I immediately started thinking of car chases. I love writing car chases. I've loved the way that car chases can be portrayed in the comics medium. Stuff like David Aja's Hawkeye, I believe it's issue 3. Mm-hmm. There's Trad Moore with all new Ghost Rider. It's a really fun, interesting, unique challenge that with the right artist, it looks sensational. And so you see it in a lot of my early books that I always try to, Spencer and Locke, volumes 1 and 2, both have big car chase set pieces in them. And I was even able to include them a little bit in Going to the Chapel and Scout's Honor and the OZ. Even The Devil That Wears My Face, as I think about it, it's a carriage chase scene. So I love including that sort of stuff in books. The idea of having a long runway. This is going to be a 16-issue run.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Every issue with a car chase. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. That rules. And so, it was one of those assignments that it was an offer I couldn't turn down. Mm-hmm. And so, like Space Ghost, I watched every episode of Speed Racer. I watched the movie. I took detailed notes on all of it. I watched a bunch of race car movies, just to kind of get a better feel for the sport. And I kind of took all that, I put it in a blender, I kind of shook it up. And so yeah, this book, like I said, it's a reboot. It is completely ground level. It's its own continuity. It's brand new. It's Rocky in a race car. This is the story of how Speed Racer goes from driving sort of these back alley races to becoming the fastest driver on the Formula X circuit. And how does he go from these kind of unlikely beginnings to becoming a champion? It is sort of almost like the Pokemon hero's journey a little bit in that regard. And so yeah, I'm so excited with how the book's coming together. I can tell you that if our series, if our free comic book day issue is any indication, this series is going to be sensational. It's going to be every bit as cool as what we're doing on Space Ghost, but told through a different mode. And I think that was something that was so exciting for me, is being able to do a sports comic. And that's what Speed Racer really is at its core. Being able to do a sports comic with little bits of like crime stuff thrown in as well. That is a rare opportunity in today's direct market. Most sports comics, unless you've got a strong genre bent, they can't sustain. But a book like Speed Racer with that kind of cultural cachet, that kind of track record, and the fact that Mad Cave is so generous with the runway that they have offered us. Yeah, it's, again, like Space Ghost, Speed Racer is a true gift of a book. And I'm very excited. We're still in the very early stages of sort of that run. I've written my free comic book day issue, and I'm going to be diving into our first issue of that series soon. But we've got a very detailed roadmap already planned for that one. And the team we have on board is truly sensational.
So we're probably not going to see that till what, the summer maybe?
Yeah, I believe we have our free comic book day issue coming out in May, and then I believe issue 1 is scheduled for August.
Okay. And Captain Planet, any word on when that's going to drop?
Yeah, Captain Planet is going to come out April 23rd. It's the week of Earth Day.
Oh, so, nice.
I'm very excited about Captain Planet. That is a book. I have wanted to write that book for 10 years.
Oh, really?
And it's one of those things that it's sad that we live in a world that Captain Planet has become so timely, and that the villainy has become even less subtle than the original cartoon. But yeah, similar to Space Ghost and Speed Racer, this is a reboot. We're starting from the ground floor. But I've always felt that Captain Planet was an overlooked gem, that it had all the components for a success. And if anything, it was kind of ahead of its time. It was almost, if you put out Captain Planet today, even if you just debuted that original 90s series today, it would be seen as subversive.
Oh yeah.
Because it has this inherently international, diverse cast. It's got the really cool mythology as far as the Planeteer rings, and I think in a post-Avatar The Last Airbender landscape, you're able to do really cool things with those powers. But I think also just the themes, I think not only looking at environmental problems, climate change and pollution, but it also looked at as the other side of the coin, which is human greed that drives all this stuff. And the idea that the only way that we can stop this, the only way that we can kind of curb the changes to our climate and our environment, and to build a safer tomorrow for our families and our children and our children's children, is the power is yours. It's something that has to be tackled on the street level, on the ground level, by ordinary people, and coming together, not just as any one particular country or nationality, but this is a collective global effort. This has to come from everyone around the world. That's something I've always wanted to tell. I mean, somebody literally before we hopped on this interview was talking about casts that at the time were considered very groundbreaking and would be derided by certain corners of the internet as, quote, 202 woke. They had Captain Planet and Claremont's X-Men and the original Power Rangers and the original Star Trek. And I feel like those types of casts are so important to broadening people's understanding and broadening people's awareness and instilling, I think, a sense of empathy in people who come from a different walk of life than you. I think that's always something that's been very personal and important to me. I'm Jewish. I grew up Jewish in Missouri. It was always very obvious to me that I was not part of, we'll say, the cultural majority of where I grew up. And I always saw it as a real bedrock principle of this country that it didn't matter if I didn't celebrate Christmas or if I didn't go to church, that I could live my life as a Jewish person and people would let me live my life. And I think that is something that a lot of segments of our country have unfortunately forgotten or maybe never knew. I think there are a lot of people. I'm fortunate, in the fact that I'm Jewish, but I pass. I can walk down the street and nobody knows this. There are plenty of people who they navigate the world, and this country can be very hostile to them. And so I think concepts like Captain Planet are so important to remind people that even if you don't know another Jewish person, or maybe you don't know another black person, or maybe you don't know anybody from who's an immigrant from another country, they're human beings just like you, and they just want to live their lives just like you. And I know there are going to be some people who they will reflexively say ew, at a concept like that. The only thing that I can do as a storyteller is say, all right, but we're going to deliver some real cool shit with this. And if you don't want to read a comic that's X-Men meets Avatar: The Last Airbender, I can't force you. But you're going to miss out on some real cool stuff. So that's really been, I think, like a mission statement for me for this book is, how do you tell the story of the Planeteers in the year 2025? How has the global and international context changed since 1989? And how do you make these characters feel resonant and current and of the times? And have them be as exciting as possible while still holding true to the idea that, climate change is very much in human hands. And there are people who they don't care about what the future holds for this planet. All they care about is consolidating money and power and greed. And how do these ordinary people rise to the occasion? And so, yeah, lots of fun stuff coming. Amon Casalos is doing the art on that book. And I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with his game, but he really is, I said, rising to the occasion as far as the Planeteers are concerned. But I feel the same way about Amon. He is a revelation on this book. The acting, I was stunned of the kind of acting that he brought to this book. This is, yes, there are elevated elements, the different power rings and their elemental bending abilities. And of course, Captain Planet himself is this sort of immortal elemental champion. But there's a real street level kind of element to this. We are following the Planeteers on the ground, and Amon really gets what I'm going for in this script. And so he adds so much acting to these characters. And so I think you're really going to fall in love with the Planeteers. I certainly have. We're only, he's drawing issue 2 now, and I'm about to start writing issue 3. He's only an issue and a half in, and these characters are really something.
No, nice.
So yeah, I'm very excited for people to get to read this book. Like I said, I've wanted to write it for 10 years. I've thought long and hard about what I want to do for this book. So tell your local comic shop you want them to pre-order Captain Planet for you. It's coming out April 23rd, which is literally the Wednesday before Free Comic Book Day. So you can get that and then Speed Racer back to back.
Nice. And I just looked it up. Cable Love and Crow number 2 comes out February 12th. And then the following week, Space Ghost number 10 comes out. So,
yeah. So you can get all my stuff.
Yes. All right. So before I let you go, is there anything else you're working on? Anything you want to promote?
No, I mean, those four books have certainly been taking up my time recently. My self-published book, The OZ, we'll be bringing that back. We are almost, I think we're down to the last couple pages of inks now on that book. So we're going to be launching a Kickstarter for that. I believe mid to late May is sort of our target for that one. So yes, that'll be our big finale for that series. So if you haven't read The OZ, Mad Max meets the Wizard of Oz, you'll be able to catch up on that with that Kickstarter once we go live with that. And then, I have another creator-owned project that I'll be able to discuss a little bit later this year. It's in a totally different genre than I've ever written before. I'm very excited for that. It's been a passion project that's been in the works for years. But yes, that will be out later this year, and you will be surprised when you see my name on it. But I can't wait for everybody to get to read it.
Where can people? I know I've seen you on Blue Sky, so I know you're there.
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at PeposeD. And I'm on Facebook at David Pepose Comics. You can also visit my website, davidpepose.com, or you can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews. All
right, everyone. So yeah, great David Pepose. Go pick up the books. Like I said, just from what I've sampled, he's still churning out good stuff. So yes, go buy the books. David, thank you so much. I know most comic book creators have limited time these days, so yes.
I appreciate you taking the time, and thank you so much for reading, and for everyone watching. Thank you so much for your support, and tell your local comic shop you want to add Space Ghost, Captain Planet, Speed Racer, and Cable, Love, and Chrome to your pull list. It'll keep my puppy fed and kibble, so she'll thank you.
All right, thank you so much, sir.
Of course, have a good one.